I think park rangers are great, and I think they probably do care, but they're very busy, and there are not nearly enough of them. So, if you don't check back in and they never hear from you again, they're probably not going to come looking for you.
No, they're not. Not unless somebody calls about you and says, "Hey, haven't heard from my wife in 2 days. Can you go look for her?"
Welcome to This Fucking Trail, home to brutally honest takes on Texas trails, hiking, hilarity, and all things adventure. I'm your MC, John, and I'm here to warn you that this podcast is not for young children or anyone with a sensitivity to swears or strong opinions, especially when those opinions are about hiking. And now over to your hiking hostess with the mostest, intrepid explorer and affirmed potty mouth, not to mention my favorite wife, Gabrielle.
Yep. That's me.
Okay, so today is a personal shit and opinions episode. This is the type of episode in which we explore Gabrielle's fears, phobias, opinions, stronger opinions, and story of becoming the badass hiker she is today. We also explore some of Gabrielle's strong opinions about hiking specifically in Texas, but also occasionally other places. The goal of these personal sagas is to inspire you on your hiking journey. Gabrielle, what specifically are we going to be delving into today?
Today, we're going to delve into some of the unique things about hiking in Texas.
All right. Well, Texas is certainly a special place.
It certainly is. Love it or hate it, it is a special place.
So, the first question everyone always wants to ask is everything really bigger in Texas? And I think maybe we'll answer that to some degree today, but also stop being jerks.
Yeah, gosh, it's such a cliche.
Yeah, come on, grow up.
All right, so let's start with some misconceptions about Texas hiking. People don't generally associate Texas with prime hiking destinations. A lot of people don't even know that Texas has mountains. I didn't know that Texas has mountains when I was a child. This wasn't something that I discovered until I was well into my 20s.
Yeah, I never really thought about it before living here. I sort of pictured Texas as a desert. I did picture like mesas, like from the movies, but I never really thought about like mountains in the sense that I would think about mountains in a place like Colorado or California or, out on the East Coast. So I guess I didn't really know Texas had mountains either before. Yeah. I don't know.
So actually there's a couple of cool Texas mountain facts that I ran across as I was getting ready for this episode.
Yeah, so, and this one, I'm going to try to explain this in a way that makes sense. So stay with me here. So if you take every state's tallest mountain, just the tallest mountain in each state, Texas is actually number 14 on that list. It's 14th if you compare the highest peaks. So if you take the highest peak in Colorado, highest peak in Alaska, highest peak in California, highest peak in Montana, which I don't feel like Montana has mountains. Really?
Montana has mountains.
I am way off base on which states have mountains and which ones don't. I'm from Nebraska, which definitely does not have mountains. So I think, my unawareness of mountains hopefully is slightly justified there. But anyways, Nebraska way down on that list. Texas, pretty high on that list. 14th is pretty good out of 50.
Yeah, Texas's highest peak, Guadalupe Peak, ranks in at 8,750 feet. So that's actually pretty high. The states underneath that fall by quite a bit. I think they're in the 6,000 foot and significantly below.
Yeah, and Guadalupe Peak is actually, it's not just a tall mountain, but the hike to get it actually has a lot of elevation gain, which I think is what people are really thinking of. When people are talking about climbing like a 10,000 foot mountain or a 14,000 foot mountain. Most of the time, the trail to go up is not 14,000 feet up, right? Like that would be a heck of a hike. Typically you're starting pretty high up on these mountains, and your elevation's pretty high when you start Guadalupe Peak, but you still gain a really long distance.
Yeah, you gain about 4,000 feet on hiking that Guadalupe Mountain Peak.
Yeah.
So one thing that's really unique about hiking in Texas is its unique ecosystem diversity. Hiking trails in Texas can feature 3 distinct ecosystems, oftentimes within a single hike, which is one of my favorite things about hiking in Texas. So you can start at the trailhead in like a desert area or a grasslands area. And then as you gain elevation, you may come upon the ecosystem of oak, juniper, and I don't know how you say it, pinyon woodlands. And then as you get even higher, you can run into conifer forests. And like I said, you can encounter that in the space of one hike, which is pretty unique to Texas.
Yeah, you don't really see, I feel like, that big of a switch in the actual ecosystems and trails in a lot of different places. Usually you're sort of in a really specific environment, a specific type of ecosystem, and it kind of stays the same, even if it's stunningly gorgeous.
Yeah.
It stays that way the entire time. And maybe that's fine, but that is something that's different here. You definitely can get a lot of variety. That's one of the things. I'm not a big mountain biker, neither of us really are, but when we have gone mountain biking, one of the things I've enjoyed is how quickly the scenery can change as you're mountain biking some of the trails, or cross-country biking is more accurate to what I like to do. Not so much the mountain biking as cross-country, but
yeah, that's a good way to put it, is that the scenery changes very quickly from kind of one ecosystem to another.
Yeah, you can really get some very startling shifts in a pretty short period of time.
You can find this ecosystem diversity on trails like the South Rim in Big Bend National Park, on Tejas Trail in Guadalupe Mountains National Park, and trails within the Davis Mountains. You're going to find all three of these ecosystems within the space of one trail.
Yeah, even a single day or just a few hours.
Yeah. We're not talking about backpacking trips here. We're talking truly about a single trip on a day hike. You can experience these three different ecosystems, which feels very unique and very Texas, at least to me. Another thing that's really unique about hiking in Texas is the solitude. So Texas hiking trails often offer a high degree of solitude because there's not very much traffic on a lot of these trails. Not even in popular places like Colorado Bend State Park, Garner State Park, Big Bend National Park. When I'm out there hiking, I don't run across a lot of people. Obviously, kind of on the more difficult or remote trails, I really don't see people. I don't really expect to see people on those more difficult and remote trails. But one thing that's really struck me is that, being at more populated state parks, I still don't run across very many people on the trails.
Right. Yeah. And that is certainly going to be a pretty different experience from the time you might have at a park that's maybe in a more popular hiking state, or one of the more popular national parks. You're going to be seeing a lot of people. Trailheads are busy. Trails maybe aren't crowded necessarily, depending on where you're going, but you're going to be around other humans. And if that's what you're looking for, that's totally fine. But if you're looking for solitude, you definitely will find that a lot here in Texas. Obviously I haven't done nearly as much hiking as you have, but I will say once you kind of get away from like the headquarters area and the actual like campground, a lot of these trails, we maybe will see one other group of hikers all day long.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And I'm not even going into the backcountry for the most part,
Right. Yeah, and when I did Marufo Vega, I didn't see anybody on the trail whatsoever. When I did the South Rim in Big Bend National Park, it's a difficult hike, but it is quite popular. I only saw one couple on the trail. When I was doing the Outer Mountain Loop in Big Bend National Park, once I got off Boot Canyon Trail, I didn't see anybody for the rest of the time that I was on that loop. And when we've been out in Big Bend Ranch State Park, we haven't come across anybody on the trails themselves.
Yeah, I'd say Big Bend Ranch is maybe my number one pick for solitude in Texas. That is a great place to get away from everyone.
Yeah, it is. And, I've hiked in a couple of different states. I wouldn't say that my hiking experience is extensive, but I have done a decent amount of hiking in Colorado, some in California, Vermont. And this really does feel like something that's unique to Texas, because anywhere else that we've been, we've come across other people on the trails fairly consistently. Whereas in Texas, it really does feel like coming across people on the trail is more the exception and not the norm.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Now, that's not the only thing that's rare on the trails in Texas. There's a few other things you also won't find a whole lot of out there.
That's true. There are some unique challenges to hiking in Texas, one of them being the water scarcity. So unlike places like California, Colorado, Vermont. In Texas, there's no places that you can refill your water. A lot of states where hiking is popular, you can take a water filter, you can take water purification tabs, and you can just refill at a spring or a stream or some sort of alpine lake. And that is not true in Texas. There are no water sources whatsoever when you are hiking in Texas.
Yeah, I think this is actually something that we can't emphasize enough for anybody who might be coming to Texas to hike who's from out of state. If you are from a place that has water, you may not realize that when they put springs on a map in Texas, you probably won't actually see springs. There are a couple of places where there really are springs and there really is water flowing. But most of the springs that are marked on maps on trails in Texas, most of the springs even that trails are named for in Texas, are dry like 95% of the time. And you really don't want to bet on there being a tiny trickle of water there for you in case you get in trouble. Like you actually legitimately have to bring kind of a lot of water. And it's hot here too. So you're going to be thirsty. Although you really in the hot months, you probably shouldn't be hiking here because you're going to die. But yeah, no, it's crazy to me how much water you have to take. Like that was something that was, I don't know if I realized quite how shocking it was when I first came down. But as I've looked back, even coming from Nebraska, which is not exactly a famous hiking state, there was water everywhere.
Yeah.
If I'd gotten desperate, there was a man-made lake probably within, a couple hundred yards.
Yeah, there's nothing out on the hiking trails in Texas. You have to carry what you need for your hike. So that is a unique, if unfortunate, feature of hiking in Texas. Although I guess that filters out the bitches, the people who can't or won't carry the water that they need. They're not going to go hike those trails. So I guess I can't be too mad about it.
I feel like it does kind of cut down on the people who maybe are going to be causing problems for themselves to some extent, but I do still see people starting trails in flip-flops with a single water bottle where I'm like, I don't know if you know how long this trail is.
I wasn't talking about those people. I was talking about reducing overall traffic in the back country.
That's true.
The hoity-toity ultralighters are going to be like, oh my gosh, I have to carry 15 pounds of water. No, I'm not going to do that trail. And then, so it just reduces overall traffic when you're talking about remote and difficult trails. So
that really works out for you.
It does.
Doesn't make a huge difference for me. I still get the people who just don't plan at all. But the people who actually plan, you're right. Yeah, the backcountry it's one reason it's like dead out here. There's just nobody out there.
Yeah. Another thing that's kind of scarce out there is well-maintained trails, I've discovered. So wayfinding is a really big thing in Texas. What I've come to discover is that a lot of trails in Texas are often really poorly maintained. You find yourself on a trail kind of wondering if you're in the right spot. Sometimes there's cairns, sometimes not. Sometimes the trails are completely grown over and you're just following the path of least resistance. And so what becomes really important here is strong navigational skills if you're going to stay on the trail in Texas and not be one of the statistics.
Yeah, that is definitely very true. I do feel like it's kind of been a boon for me in that I didn't learn to navigate until we lived in Texas. And so I think learning to navigate here has maybe been one of the better places I could have been to be learning to navigate, because I really did have to get good with the compass and get good with the map. I couldn't be relying on features too heavily. It's a lot of scrub and a lot of, rocky mountains that all kind of look the same.
Yeah, and there's just not enough people on the trails to kind of keep them well-worn, so to speak. And so they get overgrown really easily. And, trail crews, we don't have volunteer trail crews maintaining our trails like they do. We saw a bunch of trail crews when we were out in Sequoia, just out there clearing the trails, maintaining the trails. We don't really have that in Texas very much.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of trails. Generally, I think what you can expect is if it's a trail, it's probably a little bit unmaintained in a lot of places, especially if you go to the more remote parks. And if you're in a kind of a more remote park and they say a trail is unmaintained, they really mean it's unmaintained. Like you need to be fully prepared with a good map, know how to use your compass, and be prepared to turn around if you aren't sure where you are, because it gets pretty sketchy
Yeah.
in some places.
It does, but it's kind of a fun, unique challenge. You go out on these trails and you know you're going to have to be on your A game to stay on the route and to not get lost. And you know that part of the reason for this is there's just not many people out there trampling everything down. And so to a certain extent, I kind of enjoy it.
I will say that I think it's one of the times when I am most in the moment. When we're on a trail and navigation is actually important. I'm not thinking about anything except keeping us in the right direction, making sure I know where we are at all times, and checking and double checking. And I've been wrong a few times in the past, and that has only helped. That's made me more wary of making mistakes and more willing to admit when maybe I have made a mistake and we do need to backtrack. So it does kind of draw a different side out of you, or you get lost and hopefully don't die. Right, like one of those two things happen. Either way, you end up very much present in the moment.
Yes, you do.
So
regardless, it feels like a true wilderness experience in those more remote parks when you're out there doing your own wayfinding with your paper map and compass.
Yeah, it does feel not like you're in a park, but like you are in the wild, which is very cool.
Another very unique thing about hiking in Texas is the permits. So Texas doesn't require hiking or parking permits. In those parks, like I'm trying to think of a famous hike right now. Half Dome. You have to get a permit to be able to try to hike Half Dome. That sort of thing doesn't exist here in Texas. You decide you want to go out and hike a trail, you fucking go out and hike the trail. You don't need nobody's permission as long as it's on public land. And so that is a very unique thing with Texas, I've discovered. I've been hiking in Colorado for the past couple of summers, and I'm getting deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole as far as like what I'm doing when I hike in Colorado. And so this is the first year that I'm going to go backpacking in Colorado. And so I was planning my trip, planning everywhere I want to go and looking into what I need. And I discovered that, oh my gosh, I need permits to backpack. But I don't just need permits to backpack. I need a fucking permit to park my damn car while I backpack on this loop. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I was reading that these permits sell out within minutes of being released. So I'm sitting there on the day that these stupid permits get released, like hitting refresh over and over, nervously trying to get my permit so that I can pay to park my car and pay to walk in the backcountry. And that is definitely not a Texas thing whatsoever.
Yeah, there are some situations where you need a permit. You might have to pay an entry fee to get into a park. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty laissez-faire. Like you kind of do what you're going to do. And, certainly in terms of like actually hiking any given trail, you just go do it.
Yeah, nobody gives a shit. You do need permits to backpack and stuff. But honestly, I've never had any issues getting a permit to backpack.
My impression is that's really just so that they know that people are out there.
Yeah.
I don't think they really even care. I shouldn't say that. I think park rangers are great, and I think they probably do care, but they're very busy, and there are not nearly enough of them. So if you don't check back in and they never hear from you again, they're probably not going to come looking for you.
No, they're not. Not unless somebody calls about you and says, "Hey, I haven't heard from my wife in 2 days. Can you go look for her?"
Certainly not a call I've rehearsed.
Never, right?
No.
So yeah, that kind of really struck me as a big difference as I've gotten deeper into hiking in other states is that, you just don't need permits to go out and do a day trip in Texas. And that is really nice. And part of the reason that we have that freedom to do that is because there's just not very many people on our trails. Thank the Lord. If hiking ever becomes uber popular in Texas, that story might change. But I think that's probably one of the reasons that permits aren't required.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, those are kind of the big unique things that jumped out at me when I thought about hiking in Texas. And I realized we may not have the gorgeous alpine forest or the gushing snow-fed streams that other states have, but we do have ecosystem diversity, sometimes getting to see 3 different ecosystems within one hike. We do have solitude to a beautiful, wonderful extent. And we have some fun challenges like water scarcity, wayfinding, and then of course we have our lack of regulations, lack of permits for any kind of day trip hiking. I kind of enjoy those things about hiking in Texas. I do feel like they are unique to the state.
Yeah, what more could a girl ask for?
Well, a lot, but for now, I'll be content.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. That's the end of this episode of This Fucking Trail. We'll see you next time.
Happy hiking!